What was the twist at the end for, if not to personally attack me? Hey friends, it's Ren, and today I'm going to be going over my most disappointing books of 2020. Now, I read a lot of books in 2020. I read 101. I know I keep bringing up the number, but I'm just so proud of myself. So, obviously, if you're gonna read 101 books in a year, there are gonna be some duds in that. And what I'm not gonna do is disclaim this video and be like, just know that this is my opinion. If I talk about your favorite book, I'm sorry, it's not personal. You know it's not personal. I probably don't even know that this is your favorite book, so, you know, we don't have to do that thing. Let's just agree to both be adults. I would love that for us. So without further ado, let's get into it. I've divided my most disappointing books up into 4 separate categories. The first one being, you had me in the first half, I'm not gonna lie. This one is self-explanatory. They had me in the first half, I'm not gonna lie about that. But then it slowly petered off until it was bad. The first book on this list perfectly exemplifies what I mean based off of my reading experience of it, and that is Once and Future by Corey McCarthy and Amy Rose Capetta. So this book is basically a sort of sci-fi King Arthur. That's essentially what it is. It's a pretty basic sci-fi novel. This book had me in the first half. I was loving it. I was reading it at work on my lunch breaks because I was just enjoying it so much that I just couldn't put it down. There was just so much fun banter and diversity, and I was just absolutely loving the way that like the characters interacted and their relationships to each other and the backstory and the whole King Arthur thing. And then things got wild. It just got so melodramatic, like so soap opera-y. There was one specific event. It was horrible. So spoilers beginning, I'm just gonna tell you what it is because it really was the thing that I just lost me. So essentially, the main character, Ari, is married to this girl named Gwen, but Ari is missing, and so Gwen, in the interim, ends up sleeping with Ari's brother. Ari's brother impregnates her, and so Ari comes back and her wife is pregnant with her brother's baby. It just took me out of it. I was like, if I'm watching Days of Our Lives right now, why is this happening? So I hated that. That was where it really lost me, but just generally it really petered off. I felt like every relationship was not fully fleshed out by the end. I felt like the characters, there were just too many of them, and so many of them were one-sided and one-dimensional, and I just, by the end of it, I was like, oh, I'm ready for this to be over. So it was super disappointing to me to get to that point, to have read the entire book for the ending to be so not great. Next in this category, we have Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. This book had me with the aesthetics. It had me with the sort of main character has a relationship with the gods thing, which I absolutely love. I love books where gods are involved with the magic of it, and the magic system in this book is based entirely, almost entirely I should say, on relationships with the gods, and our main character is directly impacted by those relationships. This book made no, like, I lost the plot so quickly. I would consider myself to be a pretty good reader. I pay attention, you know, I make an effort to understand what's going on, even if the plot is going in a million different directions. I try, and I tried with this book. When I was finished with it, I'm like, I could not tell you a timeline of events that occurred within this book. I read the whole thing, and I've never walked out of a book feeling like, do I not know how to read? Because that was the experience that I had while reading this. I just felt like they were speaking a different language somehow. I just didn't know what was happening half the time. And it was not paced well. It was not written clearly. I switched between reading it physically and listening to the audiobook because I'm an auditory learner. So I was like, maybe if I do it like this, then I'll like get more out of it. But then that was even more confusing. So basically this book just deeply confused me, and did not live up to the base that had got me so intrigued in the first place. I could not give you a summary of this book because, again, I don't know what happened in this book. So, I mean, Goodreads, Google, you know, just figure it out because I certainly couldn't. And finally, for this category, we have a very sad one, and it is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This book is kind of hard to describe, but it follows a man and a woman, a couple, and they are going to the man's house, childhood home, to visit his parents, and weird stuff is happening the entire time. This book was so compelling in the first part of it to me. I was like, what on earth is happening? I'm so scared. There was so many creepy things happening and like weird hints that things were not exactly right. I was just really engaged with the story, and then the ending happened. The twist was revealed, and when I tell you, it made me feel like all of the hardship that I had suffered, because I am a very easily scared person, all the hardship that I suffered reading that book, what was it for? Because it just kind of negated everything that I just read. So I'm like, why do I care now? Why do I care at all? I know this is an unpopular opinion. I know that people love the twist in this book. I personally, I didn't enjoy it. I thought that, you know, this book did something interesting and new and compelling, and I really wanted to like it, and I really wanted to like it after that twist, but I just could not bring myself to feel any way about it except deeply disappointed. And the next category that I have for my most disappointing books is Time Makes Fools of Us All, because truly it does. These are the books that I rated more highly as I finished them, but when I thought about them more and more, I went back and lowered their ratings because I found that I didn't actually enjoy them that much for various different reasons. So the first one on this list, and possibly the most controversial of this entire list, maybe other than I'm Thinking of Ending Things, perhaps, potentially, it is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I know. Listen, I read The Raven Boys for my Reading Like a Tumblr Kid reading vlog, and I think I gave it 4 stars at the time. I surely don't know what I was thinking. Like, I actually found it to be pretty boring. I think it was the hype surrounding it. I was duped, I guess, into making it sound a lot better than it was, because a lot of times I'll do that. I'm like, well, if it's like something that a lot of people love, then clearly it's my problem. Clearly I just need to work on myself in order to like this book. I don't feel that way anymore. I have moved past that feeling, and I have downgraded this rating quite significantly because I just found it so boring. I actually had to listen to the audiobook because the physical book I just kept fading out. Like, I just kept not paying attention because I was just so bored by everything that was happening. I felt like it was a really slow read, and for a first book in a series, when I already don't like series, I'm just kind of like, why do I keep trying with this book? But I mean, I thought at the time it must be my problem because everybody loves it, but now I realize that a lot of people are nostalgic. I don't have a problem with The Raven Boys, you know, it's not one that I'm like, I absolutely hated this, but it's just not for me. Partially that's disappointing because the idea of it really appeals to me. I really like when magic is integrated into normal society, not necessarily like a shadow hunters thing. It's integrated into society, but it's not like a separate society. Does that make sense? So it appealed to me, but again, just did not fly with me. The other book or books that fell into this category are the Black Dagger Brotherhood series books by J.R. Ward. Y'all, I used to have a video where I talked about this series in great detail, and I read the first 10 books, I believe. I took down the video, and I've taken down a lot. I've privated a lot of the videos that I've made in the past just because either I didn't agree with some of the things that I said, or I think I said stuff weird or wrong, or I just didn't like the video and I didn't want it to be on my channel representing me. So I just privated a lot of videos. And I did that for the Black Dagger Brotherhood one, mostly because I was like cursing every other word inexplicably. I was just so aggressive in that video. I don't know what it was. I think I was just trying to be funny, but boy, it just did not work. But essentially, I did call out the books for being really formulaic and for engaging with minority groups in a way that made me feel really gross, and for being misogynistic and stuff like that. However, I still was pretty lenient about like the actual quality of these books. They're not good. Thinking about my reading experience of them, especially reading them in such a short period of time, it was really not. I mean, I had some fun, but boy, was it taxing on my poor brain to read these books. And this is not a, like, the romance genre is just full of garbage. It's not that. 100% not that. This particular series kind of sucks really bad. I was just looking back way too lenient on them, and I was way too lenient on like whether or not I recommended them to people. I would say hard no, not even thinking about how not good quality the books are, I suppose, just thinking more about the racism, misogyny, homophobia that is really, really, really apparent throughout these books. And I know that a lot of them are written a while ago, but I don't care. If I'm gonna read something for pleasure, I would rather it be things that support marginalized authors and marginalized stories. So yeah, that's my take on that. The next category is my nicest category, and it is the it's not you, it's me category. Of course, this is exactly what it sounds like. I feel like I know these books are good. They are just simply not for me. The first book in this category is Cersei by Madeline Miller. I waited a really long time to read this because I love The Song of Achilles. I love it so much. This is just as beautifully written, I would say, as The Song of Achilles, and it's also very expertly written in terms of historical context. I just did not particularly like the way that Cersei was written. I feel as though she was written in a way that is very real, and I didn't want that, I guess. In a very real in the sense of like a woman of her time, powerful in the ways that are sort of restrained by patriarchal society. And it's Cersei. I want more of just the fiery temper and like the woman who turns men into pigs. Like, I wanted to see more of that and more of her anger, but I got a lot of her talking about the men that were leaving her, or the men that she had relationships with, or the men who didn't care enough about her and her opinion, or her son, or it was just a lot. Again, a beautifully written book, and I know a lot of people really, really love it, and I have heard her talk about it, and hearing her talk about it, I'm like, okay, I get what you were going for, but at the same time, just the reading experience, it didn't work for me personally. The next book that I have for this category is Sleepwalking by Meg Wolitzer. So this one makes me sad because it sounded like everything I would love. Basically, it's about this girl who is in this group of girls called the Death Girls. Wow, I just said girl like 3 times in a second. And they're all obsessed with the suicides of these female poets. It's really a book about grief. I personally don't really relate to books about grief, and that is on me. I know so many people absolutely love this book, specifically because of the way that it deals with grief. And I, as someone who has never really experienced that much grief in my life, a grief of someone that I was really close to, I just feel like there was a disconnect between me and the book that is completely not the book's fault, and it is completely my fault. Like, I can absolutely recognize the merit of this book, even more than Cersei. I have a lot more plot issues with Cersei than I do with Sleepwalking. Like, I think that Sleepwalking is pretty solid as a book. I just didn't connect with the sort of main theme of grief in it. And I also hated the main girl's boyfriend so much, so every time he was in a scene, I was just irritated. So that didn't help. And finally, for my meanest category, it is absolutely you, not me. And of course, this is about the books that I think are bad and that I hated very, very, very much. Very much. Holy moly, I hate all these books so much. So the first book in this category is Black Chalk by Christopher Yates. This is the first book of the year that I absolutely detested. I talk about it in my Reading the Aesthetic Dark Academia video, which is almost at 2,000 views. I do not know how that happened, so if you want to go give that a watch, please do. I'll link it. But oh my god, I hated it. I hated it. I hated it so much. So essentially it's about this group of Oxford students who play this dare type game. They don't really talk about the semantics of the game, but basically they make them do like embarrassing / mean stuff. These people, I talk about it in depth in that Dark Academia video, so please go watch that because I really go off. I'll summarize my issues with this. Basically, the characters and their relationships to each other specifically were not established enough for me to care that their friend group was fracturing because of this game. If they were closer and they had established more like good times and banter and enjoying each other's company, it would have made it more emotionally poignant when they started to hate each other. I didn't feel anything for them because there was no reason for me to, because it seemed like they didn't like each other pretty much the entire time that I was reading. The other thing that annoyed me was the dares. The dares themselves, they were just so stupid and juvenile. I mean, it made sense, I guess, for college students, but they were just so dumb that I couldn't believe that this little of a thing with so much money, I think it was like 10,000 pounds or something. It was something ridiculous, but it was a lot. It was a significant amount of money that these people were willing to give up that amount of money because they had to like draw penises on stuff and get caught. Like that was essentially what we were working with in this book. I will never read it again. I would never recommend it to anyone, and that is what this category is all about. Next, we have The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick, another book that I read for a video. This is a speculative fiction sci-fi book that basically talks about what would have happened if the Axis powers won World War II. This book made me very uncomfortable because of the fact that it was a white man writing it about Japanese people in a really weird way, Jewish people in a really weird way. Made me uncomfortable. Just made me uncomfortable. I can live through discomfort, you know? I like a lot of classics. Living through discomfort is kind of in the job description of liking classics. That said, nothing was good. The plot itself was not good. The characters especially were so boring and just so one-dimensional. I didn't care about them at all. There was no aspect of this book that was redeemable for me personally, and usually this is the type of sci-fi that I like. And also, I really like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is also by Philip K. Dick. So to go into this book, already feeling kind of weird because it is a non-Jewish man writing about if the Nazis had won World War II, and I'm like, I don't love that. But then for it to just be bad in every other way as well, like, what do you want me to do with that? I'm sorry, it was bad. It was bad in every way. And finally, the last book, and potentially my most disappointing and hated book of the year, The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Can you believe it? This is about a girl who goes to Scotland and is a nanny for these children, and something bad happens. Weird stuff has been happening the whole time. Blah, blah, blah. Who cares? This was a betrayal from the entire booktube community to me. I only heard glowing reviews of this book. I only heard the highest praises sung for Ruth Ware in this boring, dull, repetitive book. Boy, oh boy. Just so bad. Just so boring. The betrayal that I felt closing this book, having read the whole thing, the entire book, I've never felt like this. I felt Shakespearean in the level of betrayal that was coursing through me at that moment. Macbeth could never. What was the twist at the end for, if not to personally attack me? This was Ruth Ware pointing at me and cackling. She said, "You read this entire book, and this is the twist. Don't you feel like a fool?" And I did. I did feel like a fool. This book was so bad. This book was so bad. I don't know what to tell you. I will never be betrayed like that again. Do you hear me? I honestly don't know if I could read another Ruth Ware book because of my experience with Turn of the Key, which people say is her best. Her best? My God. I hated it. now that we ended on that high note, thank you for watching. What are your least favorite books of the year, or most disappointing? I feel like that's a big difference between books that disappointed you, because like I think about Cersei, which disappointed me, but I still gave 4 stars because I think it's actually a very good book. But books that disappoint me versus books that were my least favorite, it's a very different thing. So please let me know how you felt about the bad books that you read this year. I love hearing about people's bad experiences with books. It just brings me some kind of joy. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there.